Good afternoon. First of all, thank you, Christoph. And I want to take this opportunity because I think it's a mixture of my origins to be a bit out of line. But first of all, I think we owe our gratitude to Christoph for bringing us together today. Yes. And he's been a marvelous partner to work with. Coping with us is not easy. And we are very grateful to him, to his colleagues, to Melinda, if she's here somewhere and she's hearing me or will hear me. Later on, other members of the team from the Danube Institute, Julia from our team who's here also. And I think that, well, we haven't ended this first day, but I think insofar this effort has paid off. And now I want to move to our session, which, as Christoph mentioned, is a twin session, one of two. And it is about essentially expanding IMEC. Now, I have to admit that after listening to the last two sessions, the one on the economic rationale and then but also on the governance, on the intricacy, which by the way we knew, but when we heard how intricate the effort will be ahead, that we are essentially going down an uncharted path, and this is really a very singular undertaking in that sense, then the question is, all right, so if it's so complicated, why do we want to even make it more complicated by considering its expansion? Now, there is a rationale for it. I think Carice mentioned it earlier this morning, and it was echoed in the geopolitical session, the issue of Egypt. There's a question of Indo-Pacific. I believe that Kosh will actually bring in another region to the discussion. I'm not inventing this, right?
You point to me and I will dance.
I'm not that powerful. I'm not that powerful. But this is a question because, people think, all right, let's add in Indo-Pacific. Why not? But that question still requires some consideration, how to do it, who to do it with, because Indo-Pacific is large, rather large. So the question is will it not dilute IMEC? Will it not impact negatively? In other words, what are the risks and opportunities here? Now, we've brought together three experts from different...
Two experts say Kosh.
That's right. I'm not an expert of anything.
I used to call myself a jack of all trades. Myself, master of none. But the thing is, we have brought three experts together to weigh in on this question of Indo-Pacific, of expanding, and by the way, one of my first questions to Dr. Lee will be, are you really interested in IMEC? Because, that's a question. So let me introduce them briefly. Kosh Alga is a senior visiting fellow at the Kratz Institute for Diplomacy, and he is the president of Free and Open Indo-Pacific Forum. He is also affiliated with the Atlantic Council. In previous incarnations in the administration, he was affiliated with being a a thought leader in developing new concepts on connectivity, on broader engagement. So it'll be interesting to have him bring in his experience to this mix. Dr. Lee Han is with the Vietnamese Diplomatic Academy in Hanoi. She's an expert in international affairs. She is also has a strong French background. So again, that will be an interesting addition to this mix. And Mr. Thomas Park, based in Manama, if I'm not mistaken, is a businessman of American Korean background, capital business and finance. So again, this is a very eclectic group of people. So I hope that the input will be there. So let me take it first to you, Kosh. Is expanding IMEC at this stage, talking about the expansion of IMEC, is it the right thing to do when we don't even know how we're going to pick it up from the ground? Or maybe that will actually help push it down, push it along.
No, thanks a lot. Once again, good afternoon to any of the diehards who are still in the room. Otherwise, it looks like we're losing the battle with the good weather outside. But I do want to thank to Christophe and to Carice for setting up this very valuable event to talk about things that are kind of germane to Hungary and everybody in this room. So before I answer that, there's a map if somebody can bring up.
Yes.
It's
Can we ask the
difficult to
control?
talk about these things without a map. And this is a proprietary map of the Trieste Association, but I'll go through and spend some time. I don't have a laser pointer. It's useful to talk about reality than artificial construct, and especially a think tank. I spent too much time embedded in the question whether IMEC is small and we should expand it or not. That's not the reality is this is how business works. And IMEC has to fit into it, not that whether I expand IMEC, lower it. So at this time, if you look at it, there's sort of few things happening on their own, which is that India is the fastest growing large economy in the world. That's a fact. I don't care about IMEC or not. Its number one trading partner is America. Its number two is China. Number three is UAE, and number four is Saudi Arabia. So whether there's IMEC, there is no IMEC, India is going to be trading more with UAE and with Saudi Arabia. That's a given fact of the issue. European Union is in a situation, and so is America, that is trying to diversify out of China. India, Vietnam are the obvious one. So is Korea. So these are natural driving fundamental economic changes. And these economic changes will support growing convergence of Indo-Mediterranean trade. That Indo-Mediterranean trade today happens 99% through Suez Canal. So talking about IMEC as some sort of, somebody kept saying this morning, we are not into competition. We are exactly in the bloody job of competition. That's the whole point. You come to this think tank, you do polite stuff, you put people to sleep, you say, I'm inclusive, I'm not into competition. You are in competition, that's the name of the game. But you are in competition without exclusivity. You're not saying, I'm going to compete, but I don't want anybody else to play any role, largely because you cannot control it. So the trade is going to be dominant through Suez Canal. So any discussion of IMEC or Indo-Mediterranean without Suez is on top of it. It's nonsensical. It's like talking about energy security without talking about nuclear and or natural gas. You can talk as much as you like, but you're not going to get there. The second point, the two alternatives, is fascinating. One is to say, hey, let's go from India to Dubai, and then let's do a trade road rail networks across the Gulf. We go to Haifa and we go up. And right off the top, as my good friend Francesco Parisi mentioned, the Turks said, no, the best way is to go through Basra up to Sikandar and then go up that way. All that indicates is there is a good amount of demand. There are people who are responding to demand signals and saying, hey, I want to get into this game and I want to go forward. So that's a fact. We put that one on one end. Then you come, and that's most of the, as has been mentioned this morning, most of the energy and the impetus is on the India, Middle East, Gulf side. The Europeans are somewhat confused, as is their tend to be. They got too many things, juggling a lot of stuff. So first, they cannot figure out, can they compete among themselves as to which is the IMEC? So the French and the Indians have a good thing going, so they've said Marseille is the end point, repeated today even by the UAE ambassador, that, India, UAE, and then we'll go to Marseille. We have good friends from Greece who are saying Piraeus and Thessaloniki is the way to go. And the Italians are, earlier on were confused because their main port is Genoa. So there's a competition among these national ports in Europe, whether it's Genoa, whether it's Marseille, whether it's Piraeus. I think all of them are useful. But at today, if you're taking Indian trade to Europe, then 90% goes through Suez Canal and goes to Rotterdam and to Hamburg. So it doesn't go to Marseille, it doesn't go to Piraeus. It goes to Rotterdam and Hamburg and then comes down into the industrial heartland. So kind of sort of makes sense that if you were able to develop Trieste, you can go to the same area a little bit quicker. And since there was an Austro-Hungarian Empire, then that is and Trieste was their marine gateway historically. It can be resuscitated to do exactly that role today. That's also a fact. Now Central and Eastern European economies are the fastest growing, the most dynamic economies in Europe. For them to use and realize their economic potential, they need a marine gateway. It can't just be landlocked. Their marine gateway is either Gdansk and Gdynia on the north, on the Baltic, or come down to Trieste. So I'll have, my good friend Jim Carafano is going to go into this idea of how linking free and open spaces. The question not is that I take my little think tank point and I say, this is how I ought to do it, whether I expand, whether I don't expand, whether I do this, whether I do I do a track 2, whatever. You have to see how the world is unfolding and where you can help, just like Dan Rundy said. What are the small steps we can do to nudge them where the water is already flowing, as opposed to recreating the whole river? So one of the water important is the Indo-Mediterranean convergence. The other is the important sort of 3 seas connection, the connectivity between Baltic, Black, and the Adriatic. And then, since our good friend from Caspian Policy Center are here, it's important to talk about, if we're going to talk about India, Middle East, Europe corridor, it's worthwhile to have a corollary to it, which is the Central Asia, Caucasus, Europe corridor. If I say that, most people can understand it. If I say middle corridor, at least an idiot like me, a non-expert like me, I don't know what the north is, what the south is. There's an old story in America. Why the movie The Madness of King George IV failed in America? Because we hadn't watched the movie of Madness of the King George the First, the second, and the third, so it was very difficult to get to the damn fourth movie. And so the middle corridor, first I have to figure out which of the north one is, which of the south one is. But if I say Central Asia, Caucasus, Europe, it's kind of self-explanatory a little bit. So I think that's, now the question, underlying theme here was whether I expand, don't expand. I think that's, to me, that's not that germane a question. The more important thing is, if I can make the river big enough, the tributaries will flow into it. That's the way the world works. So if I can make the Indo-Mediterranean connectivity to a degree where a lot of money is changing hands, it'll suck in eastern coast of Africa. They'll come into this. It'll help a lot ASEAN and Indo-Pacific to come into this. And it also help the complete sort of economic revival and optimization of Eastern Central Europe, because I think that's the heart of it in some ways. So that's the whole point. It's a pleasure to work with Jim in this sort of effort. So you'll see a lot of dotted lines, so that it's already in it that Indo-Pacific flows in, the Indo-Pacific, East Africa flows in. You got stuff coming out of Nigeria to Morocco coming into the Europe on the energy corridor and energy pipelines and going. So also, on the road that is going here, people said, what's in America? So there are 2 main bottlenecks in global trade. One is Suez Canal, the other one is Panama Canal. So the trade that is happening from Vietnam, India to United States also follows this. It doesn't stop in Europe. It goes all the way through Suez Canal and over to the East Coast. But I think if the European Indo-Mediterranean grows, you'll have greater trade that goes with Atlantic as well. So that's a clear sort of thing. I've got a lot more, but I'm going to stop it and have Q&A and have taken. One more thing I think is useful to say it. There's a lot of hand-wringing about, by Americans, unfortunately, and a lot of European others about President Trump and where America stands or doesn't stand and all that stuff. And so there's rhetoric, you may like it or not like it. There's something that I find objectionable. But then there are actions. And so I think it's really important to see what the actions are, including even in Ukraine, with all the ups and downs to where we are today. On IMEC, the one leader that has been the most direct and evocative about this is President Trump. He's the one who said, I am looking forward to helping building one of the most important trade corridors from India to Israel to Italy that'll bring, and extending it to United States, that'll include ports, energy cables, and digital cables, a lot of digital cables. And then he said, this is a big development. Neither Modi, nor any European leader, nor any UAE leader has spoken this strongly. And this wasn't in his writing, it was the one in his brief. This is what he, off the cuff, said in a press conference. So I think this hand-wringing about where America is or not is a little bit blown up. I'll stop there and take Q&A as we go.
Yes, well, because I have a few questions also, but Dr. Lee, is Vietnam interested in what Kosh just explained and described enthusiastically, or you're waiting, seeing? Where do you stand?
No, we're not interested at all.
Good afternoon. Thank you first for, thank you the organizers for inviting me today for giving me such a precious opportunity to speak out today about IMEC and its perspectives. And let me to start by the question posed at the beginning of the panel. Is it the right thing about the expansion idea of IMEC? I think I would prefer have a more simple approach, the interest. I think, the question about is it the right thing? We could answer in the way that what interest it could bring about for the stakeholder, for the players, for the actors in the framework of this initiative. And I think that IMEC expansion is a good idea. And now IMEC has a great opportunity to do that. We could consider the interest of every player in this the initiative, from the IMEC, from the actor in the Indo-Pacific, the middle powers, for example, and even the major power in the when we consider its geopolitical tentative, for example. So I think the idea of expanding IMEC would enhance its legitimacy and its inclusiveness and help align infrastructure development with the priorities of emerging economies. For example, from now on, with that expansion, we can involve many other countries in the Indo-Pacific region, even ASEAN member states, Australia, and even African coastal economies. would signal that the corridor is not an exclusive geopolitical counterweight to China's initiative, Belt and Road, BRI. So from now on, it is rather multilateral and demand-driven model of connectivity. So the initiative comes from the will of many diverse countries in the initiative. It comes from the demands of all the countries in the initiative. So it could exclude the thought about the tentative of one great power to counterbalance with China, for example. And this expansion can help deepen South-South cooperation, foster shared infrastructure standards, and strengthen supply chain resilience across multiple regions. I think it is the interest of the IMEC initiative in general. From a strategic standpoint, wider participation, including many other countries in the Indo-Pacific region, can enhance IMEC's geopolitical reach. It enabled India, the EU, and the US to expand their strategic footprint in some sub-region in the initiative, like Southeast Asia, in East Africa, in West Pacific without direct confrontation. So it's good. So it can also increase collective bargaining power in global forums such as some Group 20, WTO, and UN bodies, for example, aligning infrastructure development with shared norms like transparency, debt sustainability, and environmental responsibility. I would like to focus on the ASEAN, for example, including Vietnam, for the question if Vietnam is interested in what you have mentioned. In fact, Vietnam, particularly, and other countries in ASEAN, for example, we have played a critical role to initiate many ideas about to initiate some multilateral institutions of this kind. We already welcome many institutions of this kind because it is beneficial for us as small and middle powers, because we can, reduce the pressure of any only actors, geopolitical actors in the region. We can diversify the supply chain in the region. We can benefit from the the investment, the support from developed countries, and in the framework of IMEC, I think it's a very possible. Yeah, it's my idea.
I have to just follow up with one very simple question, not simple, but to use what Kosh just said earlier, and listening to you carefully, you're about geopolitical competition. You're not even attempting to, you don't want to say it out loud, but for Vietnam, from your perspective, I'm not saying this to Vietnamese, yes, IMEC is important in terms of its geopolitical positioning competition vis-a-vis China, let's be honest for a moment. Am I wrong or in this interpretation or not? So I'm trying to translate you to the audience a bit.
Now I think even the bilateral US-China rivalry, it is also a kind of pressure for us. And now I think we have a special geopolitical position next to, we are the neighbor of China, so it is really hard for us to behave.
Push back.
So with China. So now we have no many other choice. We have to profit, to enjoy the multilateralism, and I think the initiatives of IMEC's kind is it is suitable for our interest. Yeah.
All right. Interesting. So, if I'm not mistaken, from a Korean perspective, Thomas, if you don't mind,
Yes,
is it geopolitics or geoeconomics or
it's business.
it's business?
It's business.
All right.
I want to be very, first of all, before I answer the question, there's a lot of things, like you even talked about Vietnam. Clarice, thank you for inviting me. I wasn't quite sure as I was sitting in the audience what I could offer. And I realized if you can go back to the map, and this is where it's interesting.
Yes, I mean the control is there.
I have been to almost every city on this map, except for the parts in Egypt, actually. And that's when it hit me, like, oh, yeah, I've been there. Yep, I've been there, been there. And part of it is I reflect the interest of business, not just for Koreans, but for Americans as well. And let me go into that a little bit in answering your question. Why, for Koreans, it's business. For Americans under Trump, it's going to be more about business. But at the same time, there's ideology as well. For Koreans, because it's such a small export, it's an exporting powerhouse. But limited resources, it needs to work with everybody. So for example, to my friends in the Middle East, assalamu alaikum, Korea has been in Saudi Arabia since 1969. I just came back from the Saudi Korea Expo in Seoul, actually met all the people at PIF, for example, okay? And I spent 6 months, as I mentioned before, in both Dubai and Abu Dhabi as well. So there's a lot of things that I am involved with. And it's just the nature of business where you want to be there to understand the environment. Most people don't realize that major roads in KSA were developed by Hyundai on the Jung. And so we've been, as the Korean side of me will tell you that. The American side, I want to address this question of IMEC, why this is so important about why IMEC. It didn't hit me until, as I was thinking about my own activities, I can say this openly because I just got a text from my handlers from the US. My background is private equity, but I actually been working with both ADIA and PIF, Mababla, and I have a personal client, which is the royal group of Sheikh Tanoon himself. So I don't understand that part of the world, but also I have clients in China. The largest CITIC group is my client, and also a couple of Korean chaebols as well. And I guess in many ways I can offer the practical view of things. I wish I had known more about IMEC, because I've been having so many more conversations dispersed. If I had known there was a forum that I could actually work with, it would have made my life a lot easier in terms of bringing the audience together for first discussions, and from there we can break off into others. Another example, in Vietnam, there's over 1 million Koreans there, okay? They built some of the largest factories there. Most people don't realize that. And Vietnam, going forward, will be the exit point or the entry point for a lot of Chinese products, low-cost products through Vietnam. That's the strategy right now by the Chinese. So I see, and today when I was hearing everything, I'm like, damn, I was involved in that, damn, okay, that, I've done all this stuff. So I'll give you a classic example so I can talk about it now. Tomorrow I'm going to Kiev. This is my second time. I am representing the Trump administration. I'm going there as a private citizen, working with the 2 largest mineral companies, and I'm already, PPP already in my head, because we didn't have an IMEC. Instead, we actually developed our version of IMEC with members of the NSC and DNI, and how we pick certain clients that we know we can work with, that we can actually take an example of a company and provide funding through the US Exim Bank, through DFC, for example, the insurance, lines of insurance on the project, and possibly, no one like to openly talk about it, we do have a sovereign fund, okay? And also, in addition, I was in Korea because I was talking to PIF, and I was in Riyadh last week as well, so that I can actually get them involved, Manara and Maidan, about, can you come with us? Because I like to create a consortium of strong US allies, of US, KSA, and more importantly, Republic of Korea as well. People that would understand what graphite is, especially for EVs, lithium batteries, et cetera. So I would have been so much easier for me if I was involved with IMEC first and actually bringing the folks here that could actually talk about business. And this is where I think IMEC can really serve the purpose. I don't know how many of you guys are practitioners, okay? And I felt a little overwhelmed because I'm a passive learner and reader of strategy, of foreign policies, and I'm just in awe of all of you guys and how you think about things. In many ways, what I do is I take some of those concepts and actually turn it into reality. I put the money on the ground with investors. So I understand what the sovereign funds are looking for. So any of the projects, this report in Italy, I'm sitting there going, you just answer something for me. When I get the minerals out of the Black Sea there, okay, where do I stop? Right there in Italy. So stuff like that hit me today. I'm like, wow, I should have been here a long time ago, and I'm grateful that I did, nevertheless. So in response to your question, it's, again, for Koreans it's business. It always has to be. At the end of the day, they have expertise. And the thing in my travels is that when you first see me, I am Korean. But when you talk to me, I'm American. And it's funny how people react to me. It depends on their needs. Koreans have a history of being really good operating partners. They stay. They don't leave. Americans will get their profits and leave, okay? So it depends on the situation, but I hope I answered your question.
Can I just build
Yes.
up on that? So I think, thanks a lot for what you said. Again, whether America's bought off into this or not, we just made a pretty big deal with Ukraine on the mineral side.
Absolutely.
Now, when we try to extract it, just to say, how are we going to go? Italy's one way, but now America has a vested interest in not only making sure that we can get out of the Black Sea and keep Black Sea free and open to be able to get out that way, but also connect Odessa and Western Ukraine with Poland to the Baltic.
Yes.
So we can truck it out that way. So this is an American vested interest. So this is really important. That's what I started off by saying. I've been in this corridor business since 2010. When I was posted in Afghanistan, we tried to do the new Silk Road. Then it turned into the Chinese came back to us and said, no, it's not new Silk Road, it's the old new Silk Road. And then we're going to build belts, and we're going to build roads, and we're going to join Belt and Road, and now we are where we are at. The number one thing is that when a politician and bureaucrats start about corridors, we have all the questions that we spent this morning. Who's the leader? Who's the coordinator? Who's going to take the lead on this? Oh my God, there's no lead. Isn't there no American pointed on this? That's utter nonsense. Even if they did, it's going to go anywhere. What's already happening is, thank God you are being on this panel and talking about it. So there is a lot of energy all across this board because of the fundamental economic drivers that I mentioned. So irrespective of whether there is a one country leading or special envoy, this energy is happening. The second part of this, that also answers the other question which most think tankers and academics and journalists, and particularly Europe, are more consumed by. Oh my God, Gaza is going to derail it. No, it ain't going to derail it. It may slow it down, but again, it'll certainly go through the Gaza, through the Suez Canal. The railroad maybe is a little bit delayed. Oh my God, the Pakistan conflict is going to somehow derail and slow this down. There's, again, a fundamental point there. Russia and Pakistan cannot sustain any military campaign without Chinese backing. So America knows about it. So the yahoos in America who think we ought to focus on Indo-Pacific at the cost of Europe are kind of smoking something else. So you got to have, the question is how this is all related. Now, having said that, let me just spend two important points. I think there's a mention earlier on how this is different from BRI. In the Trump administration, the first Trump administration, we had the G7. I was one of the G7 Sherpa dealing with, the G7 were dealing with quality infrastructure. There's a lot of push on me through all the first 4 years that America, we ought to come across and come up with our own BRI. What's our response to BRI? What's our response to BRI? The last thing we want to do is have another nonsensical BRI bullshit, that somehow one country goes around doing it. It needed to be something which was bottom up, that every country had an interest to do so. India invests in India. I mean, other questions think tankers would ask, who's going to invest in it? Well, every damn country who signed up is going to invest in their own thing. India is going to invest in India. Dubai is going to invest. Saudi is going to invest in Saudi. Israel is going to invest in Israel. Jordan was mentioned earlier that probably need. But Europe will have to invest on its own side. To that end, in this conference, it's really important to talk about the roles of three important countries: India, Italy, and Hungary. India at this moment, without any, whether it takes leadership or not, it is absolutely, we're not going to repeat the point of Dubai and Saudi Arabia. It's also holding its Raisina with the general there, the Middle East Raisina and talking about it. Now they're going to be here, the Indian ORF, the public relations arm of the foreign ministry. They're going to have a Budapest forum here because this is where the largest Indian investment is in Hungary. So they're going to have a Budapest forum here. They are very much committed now to Armenia, which they're going to have a Yerevan dialogue in Armenia because they go through the Armenia connection there. Then they're going to have a Mediterranean Raisina. So India is already engaged and moving on all fronts in this role. Now comes to Italy. I mean, again, Italy appointed a special envoy. The only people I know leading to you, and I hope you meet with Francesco Parisi, is that the Triestean businesses came together and said, let's have a business-led front there. And as a result, largely because of their doing, their foreign minister went to India, appointed a special envoy, and then said, I'm going to do an IMEC foreign ministerial in Italy. Really important point. Just last bit to Hungary. Hungary today is taking a really important role of having a relationship with India, largest FDI. Its way to get out is through Trieste, so they have invested in Trieste and port. So it's a key country to work on this. And Hungary has to decide whether it's going to place footsie with China and be a pain for EU, or get into a really effective partner in this new game of New Golden Road and lead the work. So these are important issues as they go forward.
You had so many jewels right there, diamonds. So, for example, why I think Hungary is important. Anybody here from Poland or anything like that? Anybody?
I was just in Poland.
So, teraz, excuse me?
Ethnically Polish.
Okay, so, Nigel Marcelli, Thomas Rex, Heavy Movies po polsku. So I speak Polish, okay? Part of that, what I've learned about EU politics is, I'm grateful to the Danube Institute because I'm a very conservative leading individual in America. And what I could say, I'll get even yelled at by my Polish girlfriend for saying these things. But EU is kind of in a paralysis, right? Hungary understood that either they could still play with the same people or they could actually start branching themselves outside of the EU where real growth is happening. Real growth is India. India is basically taking a very similar play model that Korea did for a long time. It's just they're doing it with more dollars behind it now. So it's fascinating to see that happening. And especially for Vietnam, and what it is about Vietnam is people don't realize the manufacturing production capabilities are amazing in that country, and it's developing even more and more over time. It will be a power hub. It is, but it will even be more so as they move up the value chain in manufacturing operations as well. So a lot of your points, it's incredible what's happening here. So I'm sitting here and looking at this map, think, okay, Jeddah, many times, Daman is, of course, Saudi Aramco. And at the end of June, I actually will be going to Damascus to meet with the president and his team about how do we bring capital information and possibly the Middle East. So these are the things that I'm grateful to have met as many as I can with you guys, because I'd love to hear how you think about the framing of it, because you're literally going to create the recipe for me, and I might tweak a little bit, but I'm going to use that recipe to actually make the soup.
Dr. Lee, you listened to Thomas talking about Vietnam, and Vietnam being a more influential economic hub. Does that come with geopolitics also, with being geopolitically more leading in its region and beyond? Is IMEC connected in any way to this?
Yeah, I think now, at least in the region, in the ASEAN region, Vietnam plays a critical role. So I think we have as you may know, Vietnam is now at the play a central role to initiate many ideas to create some frameworks within the ASEAN, for example, to strengthen the solidarity and even to strengthen the ASEAN's future. And so I think now with the IMEC initiative, who is now considering to expand its sphere. I think we are interested in that, and even we can evaluate the needs, the general need of other countries in the region, and we can help, we can support for the involvement of these countries in the region to this initiative. I think it's possible, it's feasible. As I have mentioned earlier, such initiative like IMEC, it is suitable to the Vietnam's interest when we have the obvious need to diversify the supply chain, to reduce the pressure from other countries, from other geopolitical, from the more giant countries next to Vietnam. I think that it could be considered by Vietnam. So we may consider, we may act to push this process, and that depends on some other calculation, because now we have talked about the benefits of this initiative's expansion, but we can also consider the risk, the inconvenience of this idea. About the risk, I think everything has the double-faced impacts. And about the risk of this expansion, we have to take into account. Firstly, IMEC, now the volume is still limited. The number of member countries in this framework, but with it is successfully expanded, the number of member states will be increased. And how will it impact on the decision-making process of this initiative? It will be harder, I think, and surely I can assure that, because more countries join, it may be harder to reach the consensus. Yeah, it would complicate the consensus building and institutional coherence. Yeah.
I was about to say that the Europeans are masters in that respect. They keep on expanding, and then
I don't know if Europeans or this group is. I think maybe this group.
Yeah, it is another
a question which really is not there, which is to say, do I expand IMEC? So first of all, what does that really mean? Again, it's a kind of completely a think tank question. And so this is not Europeans. We should be the guilty one. Because again, it's the Indo-Mediterranean convergence. That is going to happen through Suez Canal. The narrow definition of IMEC is building a road rail network. What the heck is Vietnam or anybody else going to do in that? That connection is just to have Saudi Arabia and UAE and Israel and Jordan make this connection. Once this connection is made, fine, it'll flow through. But what am I having Indo-Pacific and Africa to discuss a road and rail network across Saudi Arabia? So I think the positing of the question is a sort of broader phenomena that Indo-Mediterranean trade is growing. 90% is through Suez Canal. If we can make this thing happen across, it'll be add to it for all the reason of resiliency was that mentioned. God bless the Turks to build that through Iraq. That's all fantastic. Now, again, sorry, you go ahead and then I'll come back.
No, I want to add something, though. This is critical for your point. The part of flow traffic that people don't quite see as much until you're in India is the amount of dollars that are flowing from India to Singapore back to Dubai, that triangle. It's amazing, the amount of cash that's flowing in that area. That's how Vietnam and Singapore, that connection. What I see the value of IMEC is simply this, okay? It is really important. When you grow an organization too big like the world, like the UN, it loses its purpose, really. But there is a value when you have an intercontinental type of business that you need that coordination, okay? That's where it really happens. That's the gap. And that's where you need an IMEC. So you may have to have an IMEC East, IMEC, whatever you want from a branding perspective. But people, if you don't actually live and spend time in this area, you really don't see the amount of money that flows from this triangle here. It's insane how much money that is.
No, but again, you can go one step forward to make more specifically. I was hope that's where you were going. So if you looked and said, okay, you know, gosh, what another nonsensical comment, but there's a connection, and what the heck you got to do about building across? That is absolutely the most fertile opportunity for Korea and Japan to work with Saudi Arabia, whether I call it Indo-Pacific or IMEC or whatever, on doing trade transit because they are the best at it. Okay, now, again, you can talk about it, but because what did Hitachi just do? It worked with India to develop, update the trunk road, you know, that basically from, you know, Delhi to Mumbai to Chennai to Calcutta to back to Delhi. Hitachi did that. That is what needs to be done from Dammam to Haifa and stuff like that. So that is a direct way to make this connection without blowing it up in any big way, but an important role for Korea and Japan within that construct.
All right.
And so one more thing, I think that's why, you know, I want to give a big shout out to Ambassador Carla Sam. She's our leader. I mean, she's outstanding. And it's useful to talk about in a much more evocative term than IMEC. You hear IMEC, you know, if I was and when I heard of it, I thought it was a new kind of a watch that came out, some new kind of, you know, clock or something. So I think the notion of a new golden road, and it came from William Dalrymple's book that came out last fall, which wrote the, you know, Golden Road, and all that talked about, again, the fundamentals, that from largely 400 BC to 1700, India was about 30 to 40% of global GDP. So it drove the trade this way. And most of that trade between India and Roman Empire, which paid the customs of which custom duties paid 30% of Roman Empire's annual sort of revenue or budget, that took exactly the same three routes which are on this. They went up to the end of Suez Canal, got onto camels, and went before Suez Canal. They went up through Basra and went up that way to Sikand. That's the road they followed. That's the common road that'll come back because, again, driven by India, because it's rising 8 to 10% of global GDP and growing. One small point, great map before this on the schematics. A lot of discussion of India Central. That map, which was on before this as a default, you play that map, it'd be very difficult for Indian officials to be coming here and talking about it because how Kashmir is portrayed. Just a pointer on it. So you think that'll hide them? The Indians are stupid.
No. Gosh, to your point, I haven't spent time in India, okay, and I was also in Pakistan. It's very fascinating when I try to go from Pakistan to India, they would not have it, okay. But the thing that my experience in hitting in these countries is Saudi Arabia, where I consider it the biggest. I have never seen, they know how to trade. People forget that. They really do. And a lot of it was constructed within, trade within, when you get there, and there's a true desire to move Saudi Arabia to the next level where it should be. India, I think, will be limited in one regard. It's still very homogeneous there, okay, and that will be its limit. And unfortunately, I believe Abu Dhabi and the UAE did over too much in many ways. But Saudi Arabia has this balance that when I visit the region many times, I see a youth energy level I haven't seen before. That I'd say, you know what, plant your time and effort here, and this will be the center point of the world, actually, at some point. And it's not a coincidence that there is a deep relationship and friendship and respect between the United States and Saudi Arabia. It's genuine. I can truly say it's genuine.
All right. We have time for one question from the audience. And I'm taking a risk and hoping for a good question. Yes?
We have a round of first, one round of questions. You're the moderator.
No, I'm looking at the time. Yes. Yeah, no,
I got a good question.
oh,
I
good.
promise it's good. So,
Your
for the-
name? Your name, if you don't mind. Your
Yeah.
name.
Sorry, is it on? Is it
Yes,
working?
yes.
Yeah.
It's on.
For the professor, I'm absolutely intrigued by your whole hub on Trieste. I've been there many times. It definitely has great historical connections. It's great that these folks are here. So do you have a vision, starting with what your map is there, to recreate something using Trieste as a hub to really make this thing work? And what is that over the next 5, 10, 15 years?
Another quick one?
I have one. What is Turkey? Is Turkey a spoiler in this? Is Turkey a spoiler? Is Turkey on side? What's the story of Turkey?
I wonder who's the question directed to, because I'm not sure people will be enthusiastic about my answer.
Mr. Perdue.
All right.
Yeah, I want him to answer, then I'll answer.
It's a horrible place to do business. And my firm has the largest resort on the Mediterranean, Italia. I am telling you, it is a horrible place to do business. Inflation, I mean, literally 75% annual inflation. It's ridiculous. They have to actually, inflationary tax for holding cash. It's really backwards there. I don't know how to fix that place. I don't even want to, but it's a great place when it comes to a lot of talented young people, et cetera. That question is, there's so much it needs to fix within the country before it really can be effective. To me, they seem to just get into everyone else's business, but they really need to fix their own before. That's why I really don't see them as a factor. They will try, but at the end of the day, for example, in Syria, Syrians don't want the Turks in there. In fact, the Turks and Chinese are the two best builders of low-cost housing in the world, actually, okay? For multiple reasons, because of the Kurds there in Syria, they don't want that influence, but they should be a natural fit. The Syrians are like, no, get them out of here, we don't want them. And so they have their own problems. And that's why I would say for now, they will be in the news, they will try to make the news, but they're not very effective.
So with my good brother, I might have a slightly different taste on it. So I think it's difficult to imagine Indo-Mediterranean and Central Asia, Caucasus, Europe trade happen without Turkey. It's just difficult to imagine, period. Now, Turkey is a spoiler in many ways, from Israel to Pakistan. So it's a political spoiler in many ways. But here, where I started from saying it's best to look at where business is going, and business will flow through Turkey, period. Turkey is an important partner of Trieste, so all the European imports by ship that goes to Europe, 70% goes through Trieste today. So it can't go without it. Turkey already asked and said, I'm doing, Basra to not only ISIS, Secundrum is where the first time Alexander beat Darius by pushing him around the ocean. That's that town. They said, well, we're going to go Basra to Baghdad to Berlin. I mean, Turks love they're kind of a big deal. So who knows? I think the proof's in the pudding. Let's just see what the role is. That's the Turkey part. I think the question then comes down to the friend over there about what my vision of Trieste is. My vision of Trieste is to help Trieste find its vision and effectuate it. That's my vision of Trieste. Because I'm not a Triestinian, even though it's an easy town to fall in love with. But I do want to see the power of business. I mean, and modest folks that may seem unassuming, Francesco Parisi, his son here, you got other people talking here. I mean, Triestinians raised this issue to a level where both the administration in Rome took it seriously, appointed a special envoy, and then launched a notion that they're going to have a ministerial meeting in Trieste. That's the Trieste vision. From outside, going back to the point, when non-business people lecture and come up with the idea of where the corridors ought to be, it makes sense where historically it's been and where the water flows downstream, so you can push it as opposed to upstream. If you're going to go to Central Eastern Europe, going anywhere else is sort of somewhat nonsensical. Trieste is it in some ways. That is why it is the number one oil importing port in the Mediterranean, because that's where the closest way to put the pipelines in. This is also the second fastest growing port in Europe, the first being Gdansk and Gdynia up on north. So again, the connecting of these two kind of makes sense because that's where the economic interest is. Genoa is a transatlantic port of Italy, not an Indo-Mediterranean port of Italy. Marseille delivers France. It's not going to go all the way to Germany to import stuff. Piraeus is a very important transshipment port with ships one way or the other. Putting it on a train or a road going all the way up the Balkans is not the point of view. So Trieste, by definition, is the place to kind of go in and push in that particular context. And this is where both America and other people can help elevate this particular story, which wouldn't have been elevated without things going forward.
Before we wrap up, Dr. Lee, you listened to this discussion. You'll be heading back, I guess, day after tomorrow to Hanoi. If your government asks, you were now in Budapest on a conference in IMEC, is this something Vietnam, pursue, get more involved in? Should this be a priority for us? What would be your answer? If your government will ask you, is IMEC worth our attention? Should it be a priority to focus on for our government, for ASEAN? What will your answer be?
I think the problem to take into account now is to see the final objective, the final goals of this initiative. Now we always mention that it is oriented to the common growth, economic growth, the sustainability, the common goods of the international society, of the broad region, intercontinental, in the framework of intercontinental initiative. So I think it is enough, it is good enough to consider. And I think it could be a choice. It could be a choice, but I cannot say that it is good to. It is time. It is time to get involved or not. But normally we have to consider to find it is something like ripeness to decide. Yeah.
So in other words, let me translate you again because you're very polite. You're telling us, well, you have some potential, but prove first the potential, then call us back. Mm-hmm. Am I wrong?
In fact, I forgot to mention another thing, another important thing about IMEC perspective, a kind of risk too. It is a double-faced risk, because on the one hand, it it has to how to say, to not to make someone think IMEC initiative is a counterweight to China's. It can threat its sphere of influence, but in other way, we can. It means that we should not to become a threat for anyone, and on the other hand, we have to prevent from the countermeasure from China, for example.
Yes.
Yeah.
All right. And on that cautious note, I want to thank the three speakers, Thomas, Han, and Kaush. And thank you all for your attention at this difficult hour, just before the coffee break. Really, you have my admiration for hanging, pulling it through. And we'll take a 15-minute break, right? Yes. Thank you very much.